the European political ideas of Giuseppe Mazzini. I think that in the framework of how can I say, the approach to the idea of unification of Europe, Mazzini can give several, how can I say, several indications maybe that can be useful also for further discussions and for further, how can I say, provision about the new studies on European unification. Actually, I would like to say that the European ideas of Mazzini are not unknown. Actually, the first studies appeared up to me in 1932 when Griffith published the Mazzini, Prophet of Modern Europe. So the first approach is quite an approach of long period in a certain extent. Obviously, the general pattern is changing, so also look at the past documents with different point of view could be very useful, so to renew, let's say, or refresh in a certain extent the approach to this idea. Then it was interesting also to see, up to me, that the European ideas of Mazzini are studied also in the Soviet Union in the 70s. For example, there is an historical review called Историки вопросы, that means questions on history, dedicated on European political approach of those thinkers of the 19th century. Especially there was a very sophisticated historian called Nevler, who wrote several articles about it, using also several Russian sources of the Russian archives. Actually, we have to say that in St. Petersburg there are several letters of Mazzini. And so there is a kind of possibility to also complete the scheme of Mazzini regarding Eastern Europe that he approached more or less at the end, let's say, of his life. And then always to remember, Mazzini has a kind of prophet, let's say, of Italy, first of all, but of Europe also. We have to remember that in 1927, at the first Congress of Pan-Europe, Kudonove Kalergi had the portrait of Mazzini on the wall of the room where the Congress was hosted. So it's quite interesting also to see that the approach of the Europeanism of Mazzini was much more, how can I say, clear maybe in the 20s than maybe nowadays. So I think that it could be interesting also to have new contribution on Mazzini. For the things that I read, so for the documents that I saw about the European approach of Mazzini, I had a general idea. Obviously, I have to admit that it's not possible up to now, let's say, to say I saw quite all the letters of Mazzini or I saw nothing about Mazzini. So I just read several papers about him, of him, and I read several articles that he published in different newspapers and that are spread around Europe more or less. And the thing that I can underline up to now is that he had three different approaches to Europe during his life. The first period, let's say, is up to the first revolution in Europe of 1848-1849. The second period goes to 1849 until the unification of Italy, and then the third period from the unification of Italy until his death. First of all, I would like also to underline that there are two common elements. It's not the correct adjective. I should choose another one. There are two elements that are constant in the European, let's say, production of Mazzini. The first one is that there is a very strict link between Europe and humanity, in the sense that the main common, can I say, human community is Europe. This is the first very strong Mazzini's idea. The second one is the idea that Europe is a cultural community more than an institutional community. So this is the second element that remains constant in his production. Then we have also to say that Mazzini reserved a special place for Italy into the pattern of European, let's say, unification, because Italy could be a kind of an example for others nationalities in order to create new nationalities that should belong to, how can I say, a democratic Europe. So the idea is that Europe should be free, should be democratic. All the nationalities should free themselves from autocracy. And in this kind of democratic Europe, Italy could be the first nationality that could give the example to the others. In the first period, it's quite easy to underline that the creation of the young Europe was the main moment. It was 15 of April 1834, and together with other revolutionaries, Mazzini created the Young Europe. Young Europe was intended has the participation of other young societies. So young Italy, for example, young Germany, young Switzerland also. Mazzini thought to a young Spain also, a young Poland, yes, thank you. Also, he thought also to a young Spain, but it was very hard to create. Somehow there is also written Young Russia. Actually, it is a later experience. It is something about the end of the 50s, and the Young Russia is just a proclamation of Young Russian, but it is not coming from the Mazzini organization. It is something different made by the those who are going to become the terrorists in Russia. In the Young Europe, the idea is the struggle for the unification of a democratic Europe. So the idea that remains constant are freedom and democracy. And so the Holy Alliance of great powers of Europe of those times should be transformed into a kind of Holy Alliance of peoples. So the idea is just to overcome, let's say, the restored Europe and to transform it into something much more democratic. And I have also to say that there is no institutional approach to Europe in these in these operations, in these actions. The question is that for Mazzini, the idea of a federation or confederation was definitely clear. He took a degree in law at the University of Genoa when he was young. So for him, it was clear that there was a difference between the confederation and the federation. He was very critical against the confederation because he thought that it was just a kind of union of something that remains different, while only the federation can, how can I say, level duty and rights for states, but especially for individuals, for human beings. And finally, the human beings are the much more important element of society for Mazzini. So the question is that the institutional approach is missing also because probably he was really pressed by the political action that he had to prepare and organized. In 1835, he wrote an article entitled "The Nationalities, Unionist and Federalist" in order to underline the thing that I already told to you, in the sense that the idea was beware of confederation. So while there is the working for constructing new, or for building, let's say, new states, in any case, the former state should not be the confederation, but something different. Then the experience of Mazzini has, how can I say, thinkers of European things, let's say, stopped for a bit because he was really involved in several other actions. For example, the invasion of Savoia, then there was the organization of another moment of his life, and then at the end of the 40s, he had the experience for the Roman Republic. So he was a little bit distracted, let's say, by other political actions. But in the second period, he realized that it was the moment to come back to the idea of Europe intended in a different way. He proposed, for example, in 1850, the creation of a European Democratic Central Committee that was transformed into a body more or less in July 1850. But the body has the final goal of, let's say, level the idea of democracy of those revolutionaries that were working around him, not with him, but around him. He was in London. He had a lot of, link with other persons coming from more or less all the whole Europe. So. This kind of Congress elaborated a kind of a program in order to create in the future a more democratic Europe, in a sense of Congress of Nations that is much more similar to a general diet of Abbé de Saint-Père, more than something more a federation, let's say. In 1852, he wrote another important article, Conditions on the Future of Europe. This specific article was important for him because it is a bridge between the second period, let's say, and the last period of Mazzini. In the sense that in that conditions, he realized that there are several ethnic, let's say, groups in Europe, and the attention should be posed also on them, in the sense that he was said something like that the difference is quite important also to be respected. So in that article, he realized that more or less in Europe there are 13 or 14 ethnic groups. Ethnic in the sense that they are different according to languages, histories, and also, not culture, but in way, let's say, of approaching the political problem in that specific moment. That period is characterized also by the preparation of another article called the Slavic Letters. They were reprinted in 1858, so we are quite close to the third and last period, let's say, of activity, of political ideas of Mazzini about Europe. And in the Slavic Letters, he promoted, another idea related to the composition of Europe. The composition of Europe is not made by 14 or 13 groups, but it's much more easier to organize them in three main, let's say, blocks. The Greek Romans, the Germanic, and then the Slavic peoples. And arriving to the last period, this last part is specifically regarding the role of several states in the future of Europe. We talk about, for example, Russia. Russia becomes in the last period regarding to Europe one of the main interests of Mazzini. For example, Mazzini was writing that Russia could not participate in the European life. Russia was, has another destiny, as to choose a kind of pivot to Asia. Actually, on this belief played also the role another revolutionary, Russian revolutionary, that was Herzen, that together with Goryov, another Russian revolutionaries, find out the way of a new way of approaching internal politics of Russia according to an internal Russian philosophical current streaming that was the Slavophiles. So those who believes that the new Russia could contribute to itself, then to Europe and to the world, only renewing itself according to the Slavic roots of the real past. trying to trace, try to give several conclusion about this very fast presentation about the main, up to me obviously, political ideas of Mazzini. I would like to say that probably we have to share the opinion of Kitty Batelli, that said that Mazzini was not a federalist thinker, but he was in any case a forerunner, a pioneer, let's say, of European federalism. The very interesting thing is that he never betrayed the first article written in 1829, when he was only 24 years old, about European literature, saying that the common European culture is in any case the real basis on which building, let's say, the new future and Europe. Thank you.